Alright class, so this is an example of a PEE paragraph from the second essay, and I wanted to show you a good PEE paragraph example that I got. Okay, this is the thesis statement for the whole essay that came at the end of the introductory paragraph. Marty Nemco's argument, which focuses on other viable college alternatives, is more effective than Bridget Long's argument, centered around qualifying conditions to a worthwhile college education, because Nemco utilizes both appeals to pathos and logos, creating a stronger connection to the audience. Alright, so that's a pretty long paragraph, but here you're going to see I break it down, that thesis, not a paragraph, a pretty long thesis sentence. I break it down here. Here's what Nemco argues, here's what Long argues, and she's arguing that this one is greater than this one. So this one is more powerful than this argument. Well, why is it more powerful? These are the reasons why. Because it utilizes both appeals to pathos and logos, and at the same time results in this creating a stronger connection to the audience. These two parts, where they're giving kind of a brief summary of what the arguments are, those don't have to be in the thesis statement. They could probably come earlier, and quite honestly, it might have been better if they had, so that we could have just focused on the last part of this, from because to the audience, which is really what they're arguing in this essay. But it works, and that's what's being argued in the essay. So then we get to the first body paragraph, and this is the point sentence, what I call the point sentence or the topic sentence. Although Nemco and Long have different professional backgrounds, the two authors successfully appeal to the reader's ethos, establishing credibility within the first paragraphs of their articles. So if you've seen, a lot of times I will tell students with their PEE paragraph, before this first sentence, if they're having trouble focusing, they might want to write, the point I wish to prove in this paragraph is that, although Nemco and Long, blah, 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 blah. And that gives you the focus. And you'll notice here, what this author says she's going to focus on is, she's going to prove to us that these two authors have different professional backgrounds, and that the two authors successfully appeal to the reader's ethos. So that's what she's going to prove. And she's going to have to argue this idea of success, that it works. Alright, so here's the first piece of evidence. Nemco introduces the article with a personal anecdote from his experiences as a career counselor, in which he listens to someone explain their reasoning for pursuing, that should say pursuing, for pursuing a college degree. And then notice we get this parenthetical reference where this is coming from in that essay. Even though the author didn't quote anything, they still are citing that they take this information from somewhere else. So after evidence, we would normally expect to get explanation, right? And that explanation would show us how that evidence proves the point that the author made at the beginning of the paragraph. Now, this is what I frequently see and what I would call weak explanation. So you remember here, we had the personal anecdote, listens to someone explain their reasoning for pursuing a college degree. Weak explanation would sound something like this. The person laments, quote, I wasn't a good student in high school, but I wanted to prove to myself that I can go get a college diploma, but it's been 6 years and I still have 45 units to go. So all that does is give the specific quote that the author referred to in the abstract here. This shows that the author is a good listener who is good at his job and establishes trust with the audience. Anytime I see something like this shows, that tends to be the writer saying, you should be able to read what I just wrote here and understand what I'm going to say about it. It's not telling me, it's not explaining the reasoning underhand, it's just assuming that the reader is going to read that evidence and see the same thing you do. That's not always true. So anytime I see "this shows," I'm always really wary about it. And if you notice, this shows the author is a good listener. I don't know. Why? This shows the author is good at his job. Why? This shows it establishes trust with the audience. Why? I don't understand how this information that you've given us, this evidence that you've given us, connects the dots to those conclusions. So let's look instead at what the author really did here. Nemko introduces this personal anecdote, listens to someone explain their reasoning for pursuing a college degree. Here's the real explanation they gave, the strong explanation. By telling the reader of his role as a career counselor, Nemko establishes credibility for his argument because he earns a living advising people on how to be successful in their career paths. On a daily basis, the author deals with people either debating attending college or attempting to find employment. Therefore, he is both trained and well-versed in dealing with these situations. And as I say there, it's not just what Nemko says, that's summary, and that's what we saw in the previous week explanation. Instead here, this is explaining how Nemko establishes ethos, how this evidence leads to these assertions. Second piece of evidence that we get in this same body paragraph. In contrast, Long introduces her stance on college education after asserting her career as an, open quote, economist and higher education researcher, close quote, and again, we get the parenthetical reference. Here's the explanation that they gave for this one, for this piece of evidence. Although Long's relationship to the topic debated is different from that of Nemko, she establishes her credibility for her argument just the same. So they come from differing professions, like you might remember, came from the point sentence, but they both establish ethos in their own way. In Long's case, her background relates to analyzing the monetary costs and benefits, as well as conditions and results of a college education. Therefore, she possesses knowledge regarding these aspects of higher education and is qualified to construct an argument based on this knowledge. So again, not just what she says, that's our evidence, but how she establishes ethos, and that it's different. It's this more kind of knowledge-based rather than personality-based that we got with Marty Nemko. So and then I'm going to show you, this is just the illustration of the whole body paragraph as it was written, okay? And we've got in blue underlined, this is the point sentence. In red underlined, this is our pieces of evidence. And in green underlined, this is the explanation of how that evidence goes back and proves that point. And the main thing to notice here is that there's far more green than there is red. There's far more explanation than there is evidence. And the reason we do that is because any of us could read this article and go back and find these two references and cite those two references. Anybody in the class could do that. What makes your paper interesting and unique is what you have to say about it. And that's this green stuff, and that's what makes your stuff you. So hopefully that gives you a good example of a PEE paragraph and what we are looking for as we develop our argumentation.